Hey guys, so we are going to be talking about misdirection, and a very easy way to get misdirected is not to know your direction. So we are right here looking at some great footage from WRTV. We're going to come back to this footage, but for now, let's just have a look at what we're seeing here. You can see there the bridge and the path goes towards the Deer Creek. And I think this is footage from about 5 years ago, from February 14, 2017, right? Okay, we'll pick that up. And of course, the moment I sit down, Timmy wants to be picked up. He's almost obsessively jumping onto me. So it's quite hard to work when he's doing that. Anyway, Timmy, say hi. Say hi. Okay. Time for Timmy's, I guess, cuddle time. Okay, so good to see you guys here. Let's have a look at some of the comments. Pretty in Pink says maybe. Okay, so the poll question was, do you consider Ron Logan a suspect? 37%, almost 40% say yes. 63% say no, right? So we are going to come back to that as well. So free thinker, thanks a lot. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, free thinker. So what we're going to deal with in this episode is misdirection, right? And what I actually meant to do, I sort of had a plan, was put up an episode dealing with a lot of misdirection, in my opinion, in the JonBenet Ramsey case as a primer for this. Unfortunately, it took hours and hours and hours to edit and sync that, and ultimately the video only went up about 20 or 30 minutes ago, so most of you probably haven't watched it. But I guess you can sort of apply it in reverse as well. You can watch this episode, this live, and then go and watch the JonBenet Ramsey and get an idea of what we're talking about. Because this analysis today won't be the full story about misdirection. We're kind of opening the can of worms, right? We're opening the can of worms in terms of just the beginning of the misdirection in this case. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think there's misdirection in this case? Just a simple question. Do you think there is misdirection in this case? See what you guys say. Sharon Drury says, I was watching it. I'm almost finished. That's good to hear. To Helen Back, good to see you. Magical Mother, I've got it saved on the playlist for later. Van the Chimp says, I was watching that video when the live started. Yeah, I mean, I really wanted it to be ready a long time ago, but it really took a long time to sync. And like, that's really how I like to do videos. I like to not have myself in the picture. I like to have it very accurate, very detailed, and not about me and not about my personality, but about the analysis, about the crime scene images, right? That's really the best way to do it. And I really wish I did have all the fancy editing and all the sort of bits and bobs that a lot of other creators use, just to give it the production value that it really deserves. But anyway, it is what it is. So let's have a look at some of your comments. Stephanie says, definite misdirection. Pauline says, if it took 5 years to arrest this guy, there must have been misdirection. It's a good comment. Dave says, the sketch released by the police looks nothing like the suspect. That's a great point. That's also a very good point. You can have misdirection that's unintentional. Karina says, absolutely, there's misdirection. Not there, it says to some degree. A few of you say not sure. Some say yes. Okay. Perfect imperfection says absolutely not in terms of Ron Logan. We will come back to that. Okay, so wherever there is staging, there's misdirection. So staging equals misdirection, right? We know that there's staging in this case, right? So let me just type that out. Timmy, just bear with me. It's always a bit of a change when I go from the one computer to the other. Okay, so that is really the bottom line. Wherever you see staging, it is essentially misdirection, right? At the scene says, I was just watching John Bonet before. Yeah, I'm sorry to have interrupted my own analysis, but there we go. It is going to be very useful to go from this to the John Bonet Ramsey case. And if you've come from the John Bonet Ramsey case, it'll be a good primer for this. So I also want to kind of introduce you guys to just the thought of staging in a very simple way. We're going to come to the Delphi case, but before we do, I want to just introduce the concept to you. I know that you know what it is, but I want to just kind of make it a little bit explicit, right? I want to just open your minds and open the subject matter, right? So ironically, today I watched I think it's called Daddy's Home 2 with Mark Wahlberg and I think Mel Gibson's also in it. But there's a scene in that movie, some of you may know what I'm talking about. There's a scene in that movie where there's a really beautiful woman and she's sort of she's really sexy as well. And then there's another woman who's less attractive, less sexy, more of a sort of a homemaker type character. And they're both shopping. And the very sexy lady starts shoplifting in the store. And the other woman kind of confronts her and says, "Hey, are you being serious? Like, you really can't do that." And she was actually just about to confront this woman and say, "You know what, your daughter's really sweet, but she's not really a good influence on my daughter." And at that moment, the sexy mother starts shoplifting, right? And then what happens in the very next scene is the both women see I guess store security. They're both sort of distracted by store security, and what you expect to happen is that the woman who has just shoplifted is going to get into trouble, right? That's kind of the direction that scene's taking, only for the security guard to address the pretty woman, these very sexy woman, and say, "Is this woman bothering you?" So the woman who is saying, "Hey, you can't do that, you can't shoplift," that's not what the security guard saw. He simply saw, "Wow, there's a really stunning woman. I want to talk to her. And wow, I think that woman's bothering her." In other words, didn't notice at all what she was doing, wasn't really doing his job. But what that cleverly did in terms of the script is that in an amusing way misdirected the viewer, right? That's misdirection. It's kind of playing with obvious biases against the obvious bias, right? Do you guys know what I'm talking about in terms of that scene? So let's just have a look. Is there anyone who knows what I'm talking about in terms of that movie? Maybe not. Okay. Anyway, do you get what I'm getting at? So in terms of the Delphi case, without talking about anything, without going to the scene, there's very, very obvious misdirection. What do you think it is? What would you say is, not in terms of the mapping or typically what you think about misdirection, when you think about objects that are somewhere that they shouldn't be, or bodies that are moved, or staging, right? I'm talking about the physical staging of objects, right? This is a kind of a psychological staging, right? So what would you say just kind of clear your mind and just think in the most basic way, what is the most obvious misdirection in the Delphi case? See what you guys say. It's a little bit of a difficult question, so I'm going to give you guys a clue. It's staging actually from the perspective of the victim. So it's what did the victims anticipate, right? That's where the misdirection really is centered. So there's some interesting comments here. Leaving the girls on someone's property, that's a good point. There's also putting the bodies on Ron Logan's property. Stephanie says the bridge. That's also worth mentioning. Mel Stiller says, weren't the girls' bodies posed? Okay. Let's have a look at some other comments. Concentrating on Ron Logan and not looking outside the area for a suspect. At the scene says the guy on the bridge is misdirection. I'm not sure if I agree with that. If you made a sketch of him that is going to look like everybody, then I suppose you could say that, but that's unintentional. Okay, so in my opinion, the sort of number one misdirection, but from the victim's perspective, is Valentine's Day, right? It's the staging of a supposedly romantic meeting based around, well, tomorrow's Valentine's Day. Do you see that? That somebody slyly used the anticipation of Valentine's Day to succor these young girls. Who would be the most likely to be caught up in that? Well, 13, 14-year-old girls. Do you guys agree with that? So someone cynically used that as a premise, because Anthony Schatz had been in contact with these girls for, well, certainly with Libby, for weeks. So why choose that day? Because it was the day before Valentine's Day, right? Do you see that? So the psychological misdirection was Valentine's Day. And so that's already giving you an idea. This guy's really sly. This guy's really crafty, right? Just in terms of that, right? Then there's another kind of misdirection that's kind of accidental. It's even incidental. Let me see if I can bring up an image of what I'm talking about. I've got it here somewhere. So you sometimes have misdirection that's not on purpose, right? And I think that is quite a good example. So let's see whether you guys are in the same wavelength. What misdirection do you see in terms of that image? Magical Mother says, makes sense. I didn't know the catfishing had been going on that long. No school the 13th. Yeah, day before Valentine's Day, no school. And who would know that except a father of a kid who wasn't going to school? Do you have school Monday? No. Okay. Do we know it was a planned meet? So what do you guys say? What do you guys see from that particular image in terms of misdirection? Heather says, I don't know if Valentine's Day has got anything to do with the murder. Okay, well, that's a theory. It's totally random. Heather, do you also think that it was someone who just stumbled on the girls? He didn't really arrange anything there. Brits Creek says, I think the Valentine's Day link is still quite speculative. It certainly is. It's speculative. But I don't think you're thinking about it from the point of view of connecting the victim to the perpetrator. I think you're thinking about it from the position of going after the perpetrator. If you're trying to lure the victim, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? What is going to be the incentive for the meeting? Touche says, could he not have been talking to other men when he said guys down the hill? He certainly could. Do I think so? No, I don't think so. I think you also speak to kids saying, guys, let's do this. I do. Okay, let's just have a look at some of the comments. Lisa says was not random. Touche says no, it was planned. Okay. Pauline says romance. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at in this particular image is that this is a misdirection in terms of the bridge. So many of the photos that I've seen of the bridge are from this particular vantage point. And so you tend to, if you're newcomer to this case, you tend to imagine that the crime happened on this side of the bridge. Isn't that a logical assumption to make? You see most photos from this side of the bridge. And so when you see this picture in the news media, you think, oh, is that where the crime happened? The crime happened over there. Well, the answer is actually no, it happened on the other side. And that is an obvious misdirection. That's nobody's fault, but it is nevertheless an error, right? So it's an error to sort of see it that way. Does that make sense? So that's accidental misdirection. And sometimes you do have that, and you've got to tell the difference between accidental and deliberate. And in the John Benet Ramsey example that I gave, I said, could the something be accidental? But then you say, yeah, but it was actually wiped clean of fingerprints, not just clean, it was wiped clean, didn't have anything on it. That tends to show that there was something deliberate going on, right? Okay. Do you see where we are kind of going with this, right? So let's have a look at a couple more comments. The video is long, right? So he was following them. Yeah, I think like 43 seconds or something. Or I think it's the audio was that long. Perfect says, I don't know if I buy into the Valentine's Day link. It wouldn't take Valentine's Day romance to do that. Well, you don't have to buy it. It's my theory. And if you think of it, so if you think of it, you say, I don't think that that's the case. And you think about another case where someone does do that, where they say, oh, it's Valentine's Day, I'm going to lure these people. I'm not actually a young guy, but I'm sure they are looking for. So if you watch some of the music videos of Libby and Abby, and you imagine what they are interested in, and you imagine that someone's got a daughter as well, that they might be actually quite caught up in Valentine's Day. I totally get that you may not be interested in Valentine's Day whatsoever. I'm not particularly interested in it. So you might say, I'm not interested in Valentine's Day. Why would they be? But this isn't about you or me. It's about them. It's also about Bridge Guy being the person that's responsible. How is he going to lure them into this sort of situation? You might say it had nothing to do with Valentine's Day. It actually had to do with marijuana, or it actually had to do with something else. But I do think it did happen the day before Valentine's Day. Does that mean absolutely nothing? And also, do you know that Libby was actually in love with Anthony Schatz? That's actually mentioned in the affidavit, that the one that was released in terms of Ron Logan. Can't quite remember where I saw it, but or maybe it was what Keegan Klein said, that or what law enforcement said to Keegan Klein, that Libby was in love with who she thought was Anthony Schatz. So you've already got a misdirection with Anthony Schatz. So you're not going to have additional misdirection to do with that. Now, I don't want to kind of get caught up with everyone who says, I don't think so, explaining that. I kind of want to get to my spiel. So I'm going to go through that, and then I'll come back and deal with some of your comments and questions. So the first thing I want to deal with is, if there was staging and misdirection, what did he want us to think? And what does that tell us, right? And if you say, you know what, this seems like speculation, yes, it is. Because we've got very little to go on. It's one of the reasons I didn't want to cover this case, is there's like minimal crime scene photos, minimal crime scene description, minimal things dealing with the autopsy. It's very, very minimal. So in a way, you're kind of forced to speculate, right? So that's what we're going to do here. And can we do that in a way that's anchored in the profile of this person, right? Does it resonate? Does it make sense? And that's why I sort of feel you've got to start practicing your acuity, your perception when it comes to the subtleties of misdirection with the John Benet Ramsey case. Get a feel for it and then come back into this case. Otherwise, you being a bit cold, you being a bit random yourself, and you could be a bit coming into it quite cold. So how do we begin? So the fabric of the crime scene can provide remarkable evidence such as it is, just as it is, right? And that's also why I say, is Valentine's Day a clue? In other words, it's right there, but you don't pay any attention to it because you're not 13 years old, right? And so the fabric of the crime scene, without knowing any of the details, just something like Valentine's Day, is that already giving us a clue? It could be. A perpetrator may often interfere with the fabric in order to distort the view of the obvious, in order to misdirect the viewer in a particular direction. But that distortion also tells us about what and why the perpetrator went to such great lengths to hide. Sorry, that should be perpetrator. Sorry about that. Let me post it again with the correct spelling. Perpetrator. Trader. So if you imagine, just in broad strokes, you imagine a scenario where someone has catfished two young girls, has arranged to meet them online, has arranged to meet them at the bridge. Well, wouldn't you want to move the crime scene away from the bridge? Because otherwise you might say, well, maybe this guy arranged to meet them at the bridge and then they did, and then they got themselves into trouble. Now, bear in mind, we've got the video, we've got the audio, but if you didn't have that, and the crime scene was at Ron Logan or ostensibly there, then you would think something happened at Ron Logan. You wouldn't think that they met someone else. You would think they were walking near Ron Logan and something happened to them there. Isn't that exactly what the perpetrator wanted you to think? If the perpetrator wanted you to think that they didn't meet at the bridge, that they didn't meet, right, and that it was kind of a chance meeting with Ron Logan, then what is he hiding away? To me, you really are quite hot, so I'm going to put you down. Okay. Okay, let's continue. So the distortion also tells us what and why the perpetrator went to such great lengths to hide. Now, in this analysis, we're going to examine the very thin narrative that we have of the crime scene and what the perpetrator didn't want us to think, what he did want us to think, and then what that reveals about the entire fabric of the case. So what he didn't want us to think, right? What did he not want us to think? So let's quickly look at a map with regard to that. Okay, I think I'm going to have to put that up again. Let me put the ball in your court. What do you think he didn't want us to think? I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. So what did he not want us to think? And so in that regard, we're going to look at a map. Okay. And I must say, I got this map from the media, and it's slightly different from what my understanding was, right? So if you look at this map, bring it up a bit bigger, it shows that's where the Monon High Bridge is, right? Let me get rid of myself. That's where the bridge is. That's the north side. That's the south side. And they walked across this bridge to somewhere around here, somewhere around this section. And then the bodies were taken all the way to over there. So whether you know or agree, or your theory is that he went this way or that way, the point is he moved quite a significant distance from there to there, right? From there to there. I don't know exactly how accurate this is. I don't know whether this point should actually be closer to that point, but that is the point that they've got, right? And I don't know what Stephanie thinks about this map. Do you think that this map is accurate? Is it closer to that kink in the Deer Creek, or is it closer to that kink? Yeah, the water is only ankle deep. That's a good point. So there's a really good point. Stephanie says that he knew the girls. So what he's trying to hide essentially is, I didn't know the girls, someone else knew the girls, right? That's one of the main focuses of the misdirection. I didn't know the girls, someone else, Ron Logan, knew the girls, not me. And that's also a good point. Someone said that he's the murderer. Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. He's trying to disconnect the connections that he does have to this crime, right? I also think that that's quite a good point. Okay. That's also quite a good point. Yeah, that's also quite a good point. That the girls never crossed the bridge because they were back on the other side, right? Bria, good to see you here. Okay, so let's continue. The blue pin on the left is where Bridge Guy and Abby and Libby encountered one another, right over there. The blue pin on the right, very close to the road, as well as the property belonging to Ron Logan, is where Abby and Libby's remains were found. Now, I am assuming that this blue pin is correct because in the same article, I think they provided GPS coordinates, right? And I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know if I'm just in a bit of a mind fog. I put in those coordinates and, I was struggling to get a sort of a reading. In any event, that is the point that is given, and you can see it's really close to the road. Let's just do a quick. Okay, so Stephanie says that's very close to Ron Logan's property. So it is actually quite far east of the cemetery, further east than I actually imagined. And have you guys seen the video that, what's her name? Can't quite remember, but it's someone who's posted a lot of little videos from the area. I think she drove over here and then she took video over there. This is some distance from the creek, unless this is not to scale, unless this needs to go down like that. Is it Marlene Stewart? I think she had a shorter name, but it could be her. I'm not sure. Okay. So for starters, what the perpetrator didn't want anyone to know was where he met the girls, right? Or in a very simple word, where. The perpetrator doesn't want them to know where. That's why he moves them this whole distance. If the perpetrator arranged to meet the girls at a time and place, he needed that information to become or appear to become irrelevant, as that could lead back to him. He didn't want anyone to think he encountered the girls by the bridge, neither that they were there nor that he was there. Obviously, Bridge Guy didn't want people to guess who he was. Now I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. I'm going to come back to this in a separate analysis. But what do you think about the side of the river that the girls' bodies are found? What do you think that tells us? Just in terms of the side of the river, do you think that is any kind of misdirection? Now think about what we're talking about. Bridge guy and the girls walk from the north side to the south side. Then they go to the west, sorry, to the east, to the right in terms of the picture, and then cross the river to the original side that they were on in terms of the bridge, right? Why is it so important to be on the other side? I guess one answer could be, well, because that's where Logan lives. But what's the other side? What's the other side to that question? What would be so bad about their remains being on the other side of the river? Chelsea says, what do you mean in misdirection? I suppose I can show you a kind of a slide that explains it. So misdirection and staging are basically the same thing. Staging is a I suppose I've got to get rid of that comment. Staging is a method of presenting something, but it also can mean styling or furnishing something to, okay, that's not quite what we're talking about. It's presenting something in order for it to look a certain way, right? And that then brings us to, and this is with regard to the John Benet Ramsey case, pageantry, elaborate display or ceremony. But it's also, pageantry is also a kind of staging. Pageantry is almost like pretty staging, whereas the staging that you see in a crime scene is obviously the opposite of that. It's either aggravating something to look a certain way, which I think happened in the Amanda Knox case, and also in the John Benet Ramsey case, or getting rid of certain evidence selectively to make something look different, minimizing it, which I believe happened in the Oscar Pistorius case, right? There we go. Yeah, selling a concept, not reality. That's a good point from Stephanie. Okay. So I hope that clears it up. Just a simple way of understanding misdirection is ordinarily your thoughts would go in a particular direction. They would flow naturally. They would gravitate in a particular direction. But if you did something to frustrate that natural flow, you create a misdirection. You create a turn in that natural course of thinking, which you can do under certain circumstances. So in terms of that example I gave at the beginning, where you have a woman saying to another woman, hey, you shouldn't be shoplifting, that's creating a stage in your mind where you're thinking this woman is doing something wrong, only to have that misdirected in terms of the movie. Okay, let's get back on track. So by virtue of moving the crime scene due east, that is this image here. By moving the crime scene, it created an impression that the route the girls took was off the public trail and that they encountered someone else, and other than the person they did encounter. Do you guys agree with that? Like, does that make sense? Good to see you, BW. Does that make sense to you? Just by moving the crime scene from where it happened and from the bridge all the way to the east, well, that way, it creates an impression that the girls never even crossed the bridge, that the girls went off the trail. Wouldn't you assume that if you sort of arrived and it's like, why are the girls not near the bridge? Oh, they're over here. Well, they must have walked off the trail and into trouble, right? They didn't know they weren't looking for someone. They were just randomly ambling through the forest and they got themselves into trouble in a sort of accidental, incidental, random way, right? In other words, it's not a meeting. It's deciding impulsively, hey, let's go off the bridge here and walk around, and then something bad happened to them, right? Now, we don't know whether he knew the footage of him had been captured, but I somehow suspect he did know. What he wanted people to guess by association was that where the girls died is where they were attacked, when that was not the case, right? Now, I don't know that for a fact. I don't know that where the girls died is where they were attacked, but logic says to me that they were attacked on the far end of the bridge where he says, guys down the hill. That's kind of where there's a confrontation. That's probably where they lose control over, that they lose agency, where somebody else takes control of their movement, their freedom, essentially their lives, right? Talon says one shoe was found in the water. That's a good point. I didn't really know that. At the scene says, just so you know, I won't be chatting as I've been a bit unwell. I will continue to listen. Okay, well, I hope you are feeling better. If it's any consolation, I went to have myself x-rayed today, and I've got 2 ribs that are really, they've healed, but they're totally out of alignment. It's really a reminder that our bodies aren't perfect, that we aren't perfect, that we can heal imperfectly, unfortunately. Okay, anyway, our thoughts are with you. But that is exactly what happened. The initial suspect was Ron Logan, based on where the remains were found, right? So if you think of it very, very simply, and you say, what's the misdirection in this case? Well, isn't it just that? Isn't it just where, right? Now, I believe it's also when. So I believe that there's significance to Valentine's Day. I suppose you could say because the girls weren't at school, that was also him seizing his opportunity. But I also think it was building up to that. You could also say the Valentine's Day thing may have been incidental. It may have been just part of the way things played out. Not totally intentional, but also not unintentional. Okay. Heather says you could make that assumption as well as many other assumptions. Well, that's what we're doing. I must say, Heather, like, we are at a point now where we don't have information. So if you sort of sitting in chat kind of saying, that's not a fact, that's not a fact, that's not a fact. Well, if you want the facts, then I think you can kind of wait for news conferences and wait for the court case to start. If you're sort of sitting in chat, sort of like going, well, what you're saying there is not true. Well, a lot of what we're dealing with now is speculation, but some of it is less scientific than others. And so I'm trying to provide a voice for scientific speculation. And you might say speculation is speculation, you know, different from anyone else. Maybe. But I do think if everything I say, you say, well, that's just an assumption, you might not be very happy here, because when you're talking about misdirection, you're making a lot of assumptions. Even in the John Benet Ramsey case, which is at the 26-year mark, there's certain things that are assumptions. So it's kind of a thought experiment, and you either suspend what you know and open your mind, or you say, it's not for me, I'd rather have a court case. Well, then that's what you decide to do. Does that make sense? Otherwise, you're going to be very happy, and everything you say is going to be, well, that's an assumption. Okay, let me continue. I'm going to try not to respond to every criticism, otherwise we won't get anywhere. But have a look at this section from the affidavit, right? The initial suspect was Ron Logan, based on virtually nothing besides the where. It was all based on where, right? So can you guys see that? Nicole Robertson swears that she believes, has good cause to believe, evidence of a homicide is located, right? In the first sentence, is located, located at, situated, all of that. That's all to do with a where, right? So if the idea was to misdirect in terms of location, where, well, then it worked, right? And think about how many crimes are about location. I brought that up in the analysis on John Benet Ramsey, is saying, isn't some of the misdirection in that case trying to say, don't look in the basement, don't look in the bedrooms, look in the kitchen. Don't look over there, don't look over there, look on the stairs. Don't look there, don't look there, do look there, right? In other words, location is a big part of that, right? Location is a big part of misdirection. I don't think it's called misdirection for nothing. It's to do with the direction that you're looking in, right? The location that you're looking in. Don't look there, look over there, right? Think about how we were accidentally misdirected in the Kylie Rodney case. Where was the party? And how that can change everything. One little, one false note can ruin the whole symphony, right? Okay. Then there's also this from the Ron Logan affidavit: information to be searched and things to be seized. Based on the aforementioned facts, I believe there's probable cause to believe Ronald Logan has committed a crime, and that could be found on his property, right? You see that? Thanks a lot, Margaret. Then he goes on to say, or she goes on to say, the affidavit requests a warrant to search Ron Logan's entire property, and then lists all of the property. So can you see how simply by locating something, you suddenly make the whole property up for grabs, and the person and everything that's there. You start seeding his property with evidence. Well, then who else can it be? And I think there was a big part of the argument why Stephen Avery from Making a Murderer, a big argument why how could he be innocent, was, well, what innocent explanation could there be for having human remains on your property? What innocent explanation could there be for having human remains in a burn pit on your property? If there was staging, if there was misdirection. So that is a thought in that case that I don't believe is true. I've written 2 books on the Stephen Avery case, and I don't believe that was staged, right? In this case, I think it was, though. Carmel, thanks very much for that. Stephanie says, law enforcement don't think Bridge Guy knew he was being recorded. They think much of the recording that didn't have visuals was while in a sweatshirt pocket. I disagree with that. Like, I agree that I think there's like, is it 43 seconds? I believe that was with the phone in the pocket. I agree with that. But I also think it's assuming a lot when you, and I've done this a few times, when you hold up a phone to record someone and you record them, you don't just hold up a phone and you've quickly recorded someone. You've got to hold it up. It's got to be in video mode. You've got to press the video function and record. So that is something that's probably very unlikely to be missed, right? Although it's possible. It is possible that he didn't know. But how is this for an interesting scenario? What if he did know that he was recorded? What if he did know and that led to the misdirection? In other words, because he knew that he was recorded at the bridge, he had to make a special effort. Maybe he actually changed his plans. He made that special effort to misdirect based on the possibility that this information would come to light. Does that make sense? And I think you could also argue that he succeeded. So can you see how him knowing about that could actually fuel greater misdirection, because he's got to work harder to defeat this link of the bridge, right? I just think it's quite interesting to think of it that way. Okay. The other thing that I think is quite important, I read about this on a particular news site, and I don't know whether it's accurate. Again, I don't know this case well enough to know either way, but they basically say the reason they only play so little of the audio is because it quickly degenerates into something that's shocking and terrifying, right? Now, that suggests two things. It suggests, on the one hand, that one moment she's got her phone and the next they are confronted, but it also suggests a situation where very quickly both girls are subdued, right? And in a situation like that, so imagine, for example, the perpetrator knows he's been recorded. Isn't he going to go after the person that's recording him? So there are two girls, right? Think of it through criminal psychology. Who should the criminal prioritize in terms of going to subdue first? Well, wouldn't it be the one with the phone? And he knows that Libby does have a phone. And theoretically, he knows that they've arranged to meet because of the phone. She may even have sent a photo of Abby to say, we are here. And that happened about 6 or 7 minutes earlier. So maybe his first priority is, I need to get the phone because she could call 911 and I could be in a lot of trouble. Whether or not he knew he was being recorded, he probably wanted to take control of them, but also get control of the phone. And in the process of getting control of Libby and the phone, Abby may have sort of run a different route or confronted him in a different way, kicked him or something. And because of Abby, he may have lost track of the phone. So he may have been conscious of the phone in the beginning, and I'm dealing with this only to lose track of it in the sort of flood of things that happened immediately after that, right? He may also have thought, I'll come back and get the phone, and then he couldn't find it. That's also possible. That's also possible. Okay. So in terms of this, it says, based on the aforementioned facts, I think there's probable cause. And the affiant requests a warrant to search Ron Logan's property located at ... Okay. And then all of this raises the question, how much did Bridge Guy know about Ron Logan? And I think it's possible that he didn't know anything. I think it's possible that he just saw a property there. It's possible, but I think it's unlikely. Because it's such a small town, I think they did know the goings on, the rumors, the gossip, the stories. And because Ron Logan was 77 years old, I think probably he had a reputation in that town, right? He was actually supposed to be up for it violated parole, right? Also, didn't Ron Logan go to that CVS pharmacy, and wouldn't Bridge Guy have known what Ron Logan was up to in terms of what he was buying? Was he buying condoms? Was he buying birth control? Was he buying, what was he buying? Was he buying things for hangovers, right? Would he have known Ron Logan's address from Ron Logan going to the kind of the only pharmacy in town? I'm not 100% sure if it was the only pharmacy, but for such a small town, I don't think there were too many. Okay. So Marcus has asked, did they find her phone? Yes, they did, which I think was partially how they were able to get quite a lot of information. I agree with that. Yeah. That's quite a good question. Where was the phone found? Was it found right next to them? If it was, you could almost imagine that the phone was left there to theoretically to locate them by Ron Logan's property. Often perpetrators don't want the phone to be found because of what you can find on the phone. Is it possible that this perpetrator wanted them to find the phone? I find that hard to believe, to be honest. But again, we don't know the exact details. So, Stephanie, when you say near the girl's body, like how near? Is it between the remains and the bridge, or like do we know for a fact how near? Anyway, so let's have a look at this highly redacted section of the document. And remember what we're talking about. We're talking about what he doesn't want us to think. And so part of what he doesn't want us to think is who he is. And so one way to achieve that is to make you think it's somebody else. So let's have a look at this this document and those redactions. On March 8, 2018, and I think that is Ronald something Logan, was interviewed by Alios. Oh, hang on. Could that not be Keegan Klein? Someone met Logan about 7 or 8 years ago and was in a personal relationship. Oh, sorry, that's not accurate. This is dealing with a female who knew Ronald Logan and met him about 7 or 8 years ago, was in a personal relationship with him, and then you see all of that. Now, wasn't this known to the townsfolk in Delphi? Wasn't it known that he was a problem guy? Wasn't it part of the gossip? Look at those words. I'm not going to repeat them here, but look at that word. Right? All of that. And if any of this was part of the rumor mill to really, really suit the actual perpetrator here. And again, didn't he succeed? Didn't he succeed in pushing all the shade onto Ron Logan ultimately? It's also likely Bridge Guy had a vehicle in the area simply based on the fact that the bodies are located at a point where the creek is also closest to a main road, right? Now, I've got to say my thinking in this respect is really evolved, right? So if you look at that, that map, let me take myself out of the picture. What I was trying to say here was, doesn't it make sense that the perpetrator would have left his vehicle somewhere like over there or over there, right? In other words, he crossed over the bridge over here, right? Coming from the side because his vehicle was over there, and then crossed over the side and then basically was going back to his vehicle, left the victims there, then got in his vehicle and drove off, right? That's one of my earlier theories on that, right? So what do you guys think? Do you think that there is a vehicle in the story? Van Chimp says that's not where they were found. Okay. Okay, so Logan had done things against women in the past. Did Bridge Guy know that and try to use that to his advantage? Well, whether or not he did know that, it was to his advantage because they did fixate on Ron Logan for quite a long time. So whether or not he knew this, it was either intentional misdirection or accidental misdirection. Of course, if you say, no, but Ron Logan was a perpetrator, then it's not misdirection, then it's dumbness, right? But if you think about it, if you are Ron Logan, why would you not try and move bodies away from your property? Why wouldn't you put them in the river, right? Think about it. If you are Ron Logan and you committed the crime, why would you have the victims on your property? Why not just put them somewhere else? That's the flip side. So people who say, no, I think he's part of this. Well, why didn't he make any attempt to misdirect in terms of the location? I mean, he lives there. Why not? He's got all the time in the world. Why does he not bury them? Why does he not take them to the landfill, right? Why? I mean, he can. He lives there. He's got the whole day to do it. So why not go to a bit of effort? Yeah. So I don't think he is. But what I am saying is, even if the perpetrator didn't deliberately misdirect, it was effectively a misdirection because they focused on Ron Logan and they didn't focus on him. Think about also, Ron Logan was never arrested or charged. There was probable cause, but he was never arrested or charged. It's taken 5.5 years to arrest someone else and charge that person, which makes you think there's a more direct link to this other person than to Ron Logan. Food for thought, I think. Okay, let's have a look at this from the probable cause affidavit. Can you guys see that? Let's do it like that. On March 8, 2017, I've already showed you guys that. Okay, sorry, a bit of a. Okay, so with that in mind, it's also likely Bridge Guy. Okay, I've said that he had a vehicle in the area, simply based on the fact that the bodies are located at a point where the creek is also closest to the main road. So if you think about that map, where is it now? If you think about that map, and I've tried to confirm independently that it's accurate. Stephanie says it is. Some other people say it's not. But you can see there is a road close to this creek, right? There is a road close to the creek. There's not a road very close to that area. But as this creek sort of goes up, there's a road very close to it, right? So was there a vehicle? It's just a question at this point. Do you think a vehicle was used in this crime? So let's do a quick poll. I'm really glad to see Heather and I agreeing on something at least. So how many of you guys think that a vehicle is possibly or probably part of this story? So there's some yeses and nos. I must say it's really interesting how divergent your views are. Some are very convinced about certain things, others not so much. In fact, you have the same thing in the John Benet Ramsey case. Even 26 years later, some people keep repeating the same things. And also great divergence of views in that case as well. Farm Girl says no vehicle. Marcus says possibly. Gid says, no, I don't think so. Brits Creek says quite possible. So I must say, when I first looked into this case, I didn't think a vehicle was part of the story. The next step was thinking that the vehicle was on the north side, parked somewhere here. And I've got to say, my thinking has evolved beyond this point now as well. Okay, so that is in terms of that. At the same time that the perpetrator is moving the victims toward private property, which will cast shade on the resident there, he's also moving closer to the road and his exit route. That was how I conceived it. By arriving on foot and crossing the bridge from north to south, any witnesses would have expected him and them to be on the south side of the river rather than where they were, the north. This was another misdirection. Okay, so we've kind of dealt with, and I don't know if I've communicated it very well, but we've kind of dealt with what he didn't want us to think, right? He didn't want us to think that it was a meeting, where the meeting was, who the meeting was with, right? Or that it was arranged, right? Now, what did he want us to think? What did he want us to think? If the perpetrator didn't want us to know who he was or where he encountered the girls, or that the encounter was planned from both sides, right? Not just his side, their side. And thus there was a communication trail that could lead back to him, and didn't want people to see what was on Libby's phone. What he did want was for people to think someone else encountered Abby and Libby, and that this encounter was random and violent. And I think there are a lot of people who do think that it was random, and I think a lot of us know that it was violent, right? So if you look at this section from the affidavit, what do you think that that word represents? Dead with wounds caused by a something weapon. What do you think that word is? Then it refers to a large amount of blood lost, the nature of the victim's wounds. I mean, the word blood is I think repeated, is it 2 or 3 times here? So I tend to agree that it's the word sharp. And I think it's invoking the idea of a knife or a blade, right? So in other words, by inference, the girls did not walk the official public trail, but wandered off it. And when they got near the Logan property, got themselves into trouble. So it could also be blunt, right? That word that's redacted there could also be blunt. A blunt object could also cause bleeding. Okay, let's have a look at another redacted word. It was discovered that something of one of the victims was missing from the crime scene, while the rest of their clothing was recovered. What do you think that redacted term is? And I had a couple of guesses. I thought it could be gray jacket or red blouse. It's definitely more than one word. What do you guys think is the answer there? Stephanie, please don't say anything at this point. Or have you? So someone says, quite a few of you say underwear. Now, if you know, like I've written over 100 books, so I'm very aware of the size of words, right? I'm very aware of so many letters equal that size and so on, right? If you put the word underwear in there, it wouldn't be enough to fit in there. Do you get that? If you put in the word, what is the other one that came up? Let's have a look at what some of you are saying. Undergarments. That's definitely that's a possibility. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. So I hope I'm gonna extend your knowledge base with what I'm about to say, and I've got to give credit to Stephanie for this, right? So one possibility for what that, shall I bring it up a bit bigger? One possibility for what that redacted word could be is the following: tie-dyed shirt or tie-dye shirt. And why it's such a great call from Stephanie. So Stephanie left this as a comment on Patreon, is because they were selling them in her memory. Libby's family was selling tie-dye shirts in her memory at CrimeCon, right? In other words, a tie-dye shirt has got some significance for Libby's family. Another thing is that Libby would often wear tie-dye shirts. You actually see her wearing tie-dye shirts in some of those videos, some of those music videos, right? And this is also from Stephanie. She's describing the original media report, I think, of the crime scene, right? Libby is described as 5'4" with a heavy build, shoulder-length blonde hair and blue eyes. She was wearing a tie-dyed shirt that is fringed at the bottom, gray sweatpants with unknown black lettering and black Nike shoes. I guess it could also be gray sweatpants. So I must say thank you very much to Stephanie for finding this. It definitely extended my knowledge base. I think one way to test that is to literally retype those words and place some of the words that we've mentioned here. So in other words, you retype those words on a Word document, right? And then you measure, and I think it is Times New Roman, you measure the width of that redacted square, and you enter in that space some of the words that we've suggested. So tie-dyed shirt, another one I think was gray sweatpants, and try various combinations, and you'll probably come up with 2 or 3 candidates. But I reckon tie-dyed shirt, could be tie-dye shirt or tie-dyed shirt, is definitely a good candidate, especially because it's anchored in what we know she was wearing that day. And you can almost imagine that wouldn't that be something that the perpetrator would want as a souvenir? It's idiosyncratic to her. Someone else says winter jacket. Okay, yeah. Could there be some emotional significance behind that? Yeah, could be that. Okay. Right, so where was I? So this is speculation, but the notion that where it says here, the rest of their clothing was recovered, suggests it may have been scattered, right? So if you say, sorry, that is total speculation, yes, it is. That they weren't found wearing their clothing, but they were semi or totally nude. It could also simply be a slightly clumsy way of saying that the remainder of their clothing was nevertheless retrieved from the scene. Were the bodies staged around trees or tied in some way and then photographed as Dahmer did? Again, the impression Bridge Guy may have wanted is a savage and random attack, but it's difficult to be certain without further detail. So there was something else I wanted to mention here. It's basically this idea that if the crime happened by the bridge, right? This is something that I think you've got to incorporate in your scenario building, right? And I wonder what Stephanie says about this. If your scenario is that they were attacked at the bridge and subdued at the bridge, then there ought to be a blood trail basically from somewhere quite far away from the crime scene, the final crime scene. There ought to be a blood trail from that point to where the remains are found. And I think one can say there's not a blood trail. And so then you've got to ask a couple of questions. Is the crime scene the crime scene? Is the crime scene where they died, right? I would suggest it's not. One reason why it could be is to get away from hearing distance from the bridge. But the problem with that is you're now hearing distance from the Logan property, right? The problem with the crime scene being by the bridge is you've now got to transport dead bodies, two of them, quite a substantial distance, right? And that then brings up the possibility of a vehicle, but a vehicle on the south side, not on the north side, right? In any event, it does raise the question, where is this crime scene? Okay. So the fact that Abby and Libby showed no sign of a struggle or fight suggests they may have been strangled and or sedated. That's my opinion. So normally when you have someone who's a victim of a sharp object, like Meredith Kircher, you see defensive wounds. In the John Benet Ramsey case, you also actually see defensive wounds. You see her kind of going like this. The fingernail marks, or what appear to be sort of half moon arcs, where this poor little girl seemed to be trying to get her finger underneath the garrote, going like that. But that's basically a defensive wound, right? So when Nature Lover says sedated is a good possibility, I don't really imagine them completely unconscious. I imagine if it's a pharmacist's handiwork, then maybe he's using something like a drug that is associated with, you know what I'm talking about, a date ... drug. The what are some of the names of them? Is it Rohypnol? Is it Rohypnol? Just trying to think. Let me quickly Google it. Yeah, Rohypnol, ketamine, that sort of thing. Also known as liquid ecstasy, cherry meth, easy lay, gamma 10. Those are some other names. But you would imagine that a pharmacist would be thinking about those sort of things. And if you think again about Jeffrey Dahmer, wasn't Dahmer, he wanted his victims conscious and alive. He didn't want them, like he went to quite a lot of effort to try and keep them in a zombie state, right? It's quite gross what we're talking about. But Stephanie says, I have a lot of experience with GHB, unfortunately. So that's kind of what I think in my mind, that this perpetrator would have wanted them immobilized, but nevertheless alive and kind of conscious for the purposes of what he wanted to do, right? And then after that was completed, then he stabbed them to generate a false scenario of a violent encounter. It's not a sexual encounter, it's a violent encounter with someone they didn't know, nor had arranged a meeting with, and that it wasn't premeditated or planned. Okay, so now we're going to deal with what we are dealing with. Stephanie says it knocks you out within 20 to 30 seconds. The thing that I'm struggling a little bit with is, how did he get them to ingest this substance? And I've got a problem imagining that he gave them a pill and offered them a glass of water and said, okay, do that. So I think the alternative is that he may have injected the substance. I think that is an alternative. And I think one can also look at, it could also be on a rag. It's also possible. Stephanie, I think, might have some better speculative ideas based on her knowledge. I don't think chloroform is totally overstated in true crime. It is. I dealt with chloroform when I wrote books about Casey Anthony. Chloroform is totally, it's a true crime cliche, but it's actually It takes quite a long time to take effect, and there are other problems with it. Nicole says, would that appear on the autopsy? It could, yeah, could. Laura says, I think injections. The problem with injections is you've got to carry them, and if you've got two victims, it's going to be quite hard to subdue both of them when you are injecting the one, if that makes sense. It's also possible that he carried a gun and the injections, and he used the gun to say, don't run away, and then unexpectedly injected the one, and then the other one would run away, probably. But obviously a man who's possibly 46 years old and two little girls, 13, 14, it really would be no contest in a situation like that, unfortunately. Okay. So what are we dealing with here? Not what aren't we dealing with, what are we dealing with? What is the situation here? What is the situation here? Okay. I don't know if you guys saw, I just passed by a screen grab. Casey Anthony is going to be appearing in a documentary at the end of this month. I don't know if you guys want me to cover that. Okay. If you compare the online scenario of catfishing or just generally engaging in secret, inappropriate activity with a crime scene that involves staging, there's a similarity. Let me say that again. If you compare the online scenario of catfishing, in other words, where you're pretending to be someone else, where there's misdirection that is part and parcel of that activity anyway, right? Your avatar of this handsome young model who's a rich musician is already misdirection, right? And you're doing that, you're engaging in secret, in inappropriate activity. Well, think about that, just that scenario with a crime scene that involves staging. Well, there's a similarity. There's instant misdirection. The misdirection is absolutely part and parcel of it. Tracks are covered. Now think about online tracks that need to be covered. And then there is misdirection so that it's harder to track down the perpetrator in terms of the crime scene tracks, right? Also, the idea that the girls were set up to meet someone who didn't eventually show up, who did eventually show up, also suggests Ali might be set up to implicate someone who didn't actually commit the crime. I'm not sure if I'm reading this right. The idea that the girls were set up to meet someone who didn't eventually show up, in other words, that they randomly met someone, suggests Ali was set up to implicate someone who didn't commit the crime. So in a very short sense, in a very basic sense, what I'm trying to say is this idea of you misrepresent yourself as this handsome model. Why would you not, just as a matter of course, misrepresent the perpetrator? I mean, that's what you're all about, is hiding who you are, right? Hiding who you are behind somebody else. Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. Thanks a lot for that. Okay. One does have to wonder, when Ali were pursuing Keegan Klein, didn't Richard Allen begin to feel uneasy and uncomfortable that LE may be closing in on him? So I want you to think about the following. You are Richard Allen, and it is this year, it's basically March, April, May, going into August. And you are reading the news just like everybody else. You are Richard Allen, and you're reading that Keegan Klein is talking to the police and that he's being accused of certain things by the police, and the Anthony Shots profile literally makes it into the media narrative. How are you going to feel? How are you going to feel seeing that in the media? And also, what are you going to do about whatever? If you see that, what are you going to do? Are you going to just hide in plain sight? You're going to do nothing? Aren't you going to feel like it's getting a little bit warm? Aren't you going to feel like, aren't you going to start worrying? So if that's the case, why not leave Delphi? Now, it's possible Richard Allen assumed that Klein either wouldn't reveal other users of the profile, or if he did, he still wouldn't lead Ali to him. And that really raises a really interesting scenario in my mind, right? Which is the flip side of it. As soon as Keegan Klein acknowledges that he knows who Richard Allen is, then he outs himself as an accessory. Then he outs himself as an accessory after the fact. In other words, Keegan Klein himself doesn't need to have committed a crime in order to be guilty of being an accessory. And as soon as he acknowledges that he knew something, well, then he's in trouble. And you can imagine that someone else associated with him is comforted by that idea, that he's never ever going to acknowledge that he knew someone, because then he's basically going to be the fall guy for the same crime, right? But there's a but. What if Keegan Klein committed a lesser crime or lesser crimes and is already in jail? So in other words, he's got things to lose, and he can lose more or he can lose less. So on the one hand, you might think, well, there's no upside for him confessing because he would only get more jail time. Well, unless he's already getting quite a lot of jail time, he's in jail anyway. And then you have a situation of, well, he could plea, he could cop a plea deal. In other words, the cops want to put someone behind bars, yes, but maybe they want to put someone else behind bars even more. And maybe that's worth a lot to them. Does that make sense? Do you see how you can, without really knowing all that much about the case, you can just look at things like timeline, things that we do know, and really takes you into really interesting areas, right? What do I have over here? So this may have been an error on the suspect's part that Keegan Klein would never sing, right? We now know that the Anthony Shots profile was part of the fabric of this case, not only to set up the meeting, but also manipulating and staging the scenario where the teenager fell in love with a fake avatar. I want you guys to think about that actually, from what we know, Libby actually fell in love with Anthony Shots over a period of weeks. She fell in love with him. Not she liked him or she thought he was cool. She was literally, from what she was saying, she was literally falling in love with him. And so when does all of that come to a head? Well, Valentine's Day. So where a teenager falls in love with a fake avatar, and then you set up a phantasm just before Valentine's Day, well, that's when her expectations would be at a peak. And my impression, and this is something I really want to go into more detail, I just don't know if I've got enough information on it, but somewhere it was said that law enforcement could tell that there are at least two different authors to the Anthony Shots profile, where they said this person's language is different to that person's. This person, so you kind of get the sense that that profile really was shared. And so the question is, are you going to be able to show or prove that some of the language used by one of the versions of Anthony Shots is the same kind of lingo that Richard Allen used, is that something that's going to be easy to show or not? Or is it going to be the opposite? That actually there was another person besides Richard Allen that spoke in a certain way. So I must also say that what we're seeing here suggests a fairly brazen but also intuitive character. If you think about the whole thing of that his daughter looks like Libby, think about just how brazen that psychology is. He seems to be the sort of person who could do something, hide it, and then feel confident enough to go about his business despite his proximity to the sheriff's office, perhaps. Think about Jeffrey Dahmer, how brazen he was. And on the one side where there is inadequacy, so sexual inadequacy, well, on the other side, there's a kind of confidence, right? A kind of social confidence that you wouldn't expect. So one wonders, do you have the same thing with the Delphi case? You have sexual inadequacy in a sense, but right next to that, someone who's actually quite socially skilled. And isn't a pharmacy technician quite socially skilled? Well, that's the impression you got from his co-workers, was that he was a really nice guy. You get that impression from almost everyone. The barman who knew him said, I just can't believe it's him. It doesn't even look like him. It doesn't even sound like him in his opinion, because he was such a nice guy. So that was basically his disguise in a way. You could even call that a misdirection. I think Chris Watts, when he committed his crime, thought, there's no way anyone will believe I could do this because everyone thinks I'm a nice guy. And in a way that is held. A lot of people still find it hard to believe. Stephanie says, with what the hell did KK think was going to happen if he got out of the car to meet Libby? Okay. So I think this scenario, all three layers could do with some fine tuning. I probably am going to do some fine tuning. Is there anything you guys would like to add, subtract, edit, or amend in some way to this discussion on misdirection? Do you think that the vehicle came from the north or from the south? Do you think a vehicle was involved or not involved? What are your thoughts on that? Let's have a look. So I'm not going to take it much further than that. We are going to talk a little bit about why are the court records sealed, very briefly, and then also maybe we can start the conversation of, did Bridge Guy use a vehicle? Okay. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying. Ginger Snap says no vehicle. Stephanie says vehicle to transport. DS says, where did the idea of no defensive wounds come from? Not quite sure, to be honest. Isn't it in the affidavit? I just read it in a report. Van der Chimp says an escaped vehicle. Helena says, I thought there was a red Jeep. Azza says he's stuck through the woods all the way home. That was my very first scenario. I don't think that that's true anymore. Yes, it is. So there we go. It is in the Ron Logan warrant. Okay. Okay. So what do you guys think is the reason the court records are sealed? What do you think the reason is for that? Now, I've heard some, I heard Scott, what's his name? Crime Talk who's the guy on Crime Talk? Scott, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just, anyway, the guy on Crime Talk basically saying that it's to protect the integrity of the investigation and to protect his presumption of innocence. There we go. Yeah. So I heard all of that, and that's the well-known scenario. But I don't really think that is the scenario. I think it's part of the scenario, but I think it's really a small part of the scenario. Okay. Ginger Snap says another person involved. But in a nutshell, why do you think the court records are sealed? In a nutshell, what do you think the answer is? Stephanie says to keep accomplices from knowing they're onto him. Okay. Sharon Drury says social media. What was Diaz's question? I must have missed it. Lizelle says to catch the rest of the perps. Okay. Marcus says to protect the prosecution case. That I think is the best answer so far. To protect the prosecution case, how? Someone says to protect the girl's reputation. Someone says victims are minors. That's, I think, definitely a factor. That is definitely a factor. Songbird says to protect someone. Okay. I'm still not seeing what I think is the answer here. Maybe I'm wrong. Avoid a tainted jury. I think that is also part of it. Also, I think quite a big part of it. Let's have a look at some more. Tracy says all of the above. Okay. Cynthia says keep secret the evidence. Okay, so I'm going to tell you why I think it's sealed. Basically, in 2 words: plea deal. Right. The last time I saw cases like this that was so tightly sealed with 2 cases. The Chris Watts case, where we knew a lot about it and then we knew nothing, and then we knew a crap load about it. But certainly it was like September, October, going into November, we knew nothing. We didn't even, like, in terms of Nicole Kessinger, we didn't know anything about that, right? That's the Chris Watts case, right? Another case that was very guarded was the Patrick Frazee case. Now, I've obviously written books about the Patrick Frazee case and the Chris Watts case. Well, guess what was in play in both of those cases? Plea deals. Chris Watts made a plea deal with the prosecution, not a very good one. Had that plea deal been discussed in the media, you can bet your bottom dollar that social media would have ridiculed the plea deal, and you would have had certain channels basically saying he's crazy. At least go to court and fight for your, at least have a court case, at least have a trial. You can imagine all of true crime kind of saying yes, please, we want a trial, right? And that could have really shot the prosecution's case in the foot. And his family could have gotten the idea, we can't have a plea deal here and convince Chris Watts not to have a plea deal, right? So in the Chris Watts case, the reason it was so tightly sealed, why no one spoke about it, was to preserve the cases as it was, but basically to preserve the plea deal, right? To make sure that the plea deal remains a deal, right? in the Patrick Frazee case, you actually had his mistress providing or agreeing to provide incredible detail about what happened at the crime scene. She was involved in mopping up his crime scene, and she was willing to talk about it. So there was a big plea deal there. But in exchange for that, she wanted to be kept out of the media spotlight as well. And so they gave her that assurance. And that's what happened. They suppressed the media narrative and the social media narrative. That's exactly what we're having here. So who's the candidate, the prime candidate for a plea deal in this case? So Sharon asked, can you explain what a plea deal is? A plea deal is basically where you acknowledge something that is of legal import in exchange for some benefit, right? So you might say, if a certain person made a plea deal with the authorities, why can't the authorities just say, we made a plea deal with that person? Well, because that person could change his mind, and it probably is contingent on the public not knowing that. So they can't say, until the court case is over, we made a deal. You might also say people would be horrified if they knew that the authorities were making concessions with a monster in order to catch another monster. And the public might say, no, we don't accept this, no deal, whatever. And the person making the deal might then get quite nervous. But what we have seen already is a certain person's charges already being minimized right now in the middle of all of this. At the same time that the case has been sealed after massive media. So if you think about it, you think about what happens. You have a big press conference where you announce we caught this guy. And then what happens at the press conference? You don't really even say anything. You have all the officers present, you wait until Monday. You have all of these officers present, and all you say is, well, we've arrested someone and his name's that, and we're not going to say anything more than that. And you sort of wonder, over that period where they were waiting until Monday, isn't that when the plea deal happened? Isn't that when someone else felt incredible pressure? Isn't that when someone else felt that was their last chance to make their situation better? So shall we look at the legal definition of a plea deal? It's a agreement in criminal law proceedings whereby the prosecutor provides a concession, right? It's kind of where it's a quid pro quo. There's a bit of give and take. The defendant acknowledges something, hands over certain information that can be inculpatory to himself, but also to someone else. And then the prosecutor says, okay, for giving us this information that you should actually be sanctioned, we're actually going to reward you. And then we can take this information and apply it to a different defendant. Does that make sense? So it says there are a couple of types of plea bargains. There's charge bargaining, sentence bargaining, and fact bargaining. So with Keegan Klein, one wonders if there was a plea bargain, was it charge bargaining, was it sentence bargaining, or was it both? Anyway, does that make sense? Yvonne asked, did he have 5 charges removed? I think 5 were removed and 12 were lessened. That's how I understand it. Okay. Right. Okay. So what do you guys think? Do you think Bridge Guy made use of a vehicle? You guys think Bridge Guy made use of a vehicle? Now, I think when you ask that question, you need to look at a map. You need to look at the scene. Don't just speculate. Don't just say, yeah, I think he used a vehicle, or no. Look at a map and try and see the possibilities of a vehicle. Do you see any roads over here? Do you see any roads? Is that enough of a view to decide yes or no? So I'm going to go back to that video I played right at the beginning, and let's have another look at the scene, right? Where is it? I think it's over here. This is from WRTV. I'll put a link to that in chat. So while you're looking at this footage, think about whether you think a vehicle could have been involved, right? Let's have a look. Okay, I just want to look at the date of this, 14 February 2017. Okay. So one thing that I think you don't need to be a rocket scientist to appreciate is it's winter. This crime happened in winter, in February in Indiana. And so the tree lining is actually quite thin. In a weird way, the trees are almost like a very thin fuzz. You can kind of see right through them. In fact, if you look at the image behind me, look how you see right through the trees across the river to the other side, right? So are you really getting much protection in terms of someone that might be in the area wandering by, really getting much protection from being seen if you're out there in the woods, right? Let's continue. Now, in terms of this idea of misdirection, if you are the police and you found the victims on the north side of the river by Ron Logan's property, are you going to be looking on the south side for things like tire tracks? Are you going to really be looking for evidence on the south side? Or certainly in the beginning, are you going to be spending all your time in this demarcated crime scene? And you can see where the tape extends behind me. Are you going to spend all your time focusing your energy, and bear in mind it's an outdoor crime scene, on that side of the river? And so after a certain amount of time passes, right, it rains, the wind blows, all that kind of thing. Maybe the crime scene is actually somewhere else. And thank you very much. After enough time, the wind just blows it all away, right? Or alternatively, if the crime scene is inside a vehicle, will you drive the crime scene away? Thank you very much. Go to Ron Logan's property and look for it there. Thanks a lot. Kumakonda, thanks for that. I do think you've got to be open to the possibility that it could be a vehicle, right? Again, let's look at this footage and try and see if we can see any roads in the area. So can you see how we're struggling to orientate ourselves again? I may need to fast forward this video in a moment, but let's see where it takes us. Those look to me like reporters. And have they just climbed over crime scene tape over there? Yeah, it's a reporter with a camera over there. Okay, let's move on a little bit forward. Okay, do you know where that is? Can you guys see where that is? So here's a residence over here. There's the river. The bridge is actually, I think somewhere, is it in this direction? Let's have a look. So there's another helicopter flying over there. Do you see how close this road comes to the creek in this section? Look how close that is. It's literally right next door. Look how this road, this is the north side. Look how the road runs all along this creek on the north side. Okay, let's jump a little bit ahead. So there's the cemetery. And that is obviously on the 14th. That's the focus of the investigation, right? On the 14th. Look at all the vehicles that are there. Sorry about this picture breakup. You've got all those vehicles on that side and like none on the other side. So if the idea was misdirection, it succeeded. Are there any vehicles by the bridge? Or is there any activity by the bridge? Okay, so there is the bridge. And what we want to try and do is get a zoomed out image of both sides of this river and look at the roads on either side, right? There we go. Well, it's not quite the way we want it. We want it from this perspective, looking that way. Now, what do you see over here? This is the south side. That's the north side. What do you see right over there? It's a road, right? You see a bridge over there. There's the bridge, but it extends all the way into the woods over here. And then there's a road coming this way. There's a road right next to the bridge. Marcus says, thanks for the excellent live. I'll catch the end tomorrow. Too bad that we're letting you go, but it is almost midnight. Thanks a lot, Marcus. So let me be explicit about that. There is a road right beside the bridge on the south side. And if it's not clear, the road is covered in woods as well on the south side. So the cemetery, I think, is somewhere around here, and the Ron Logan property somewhere around there, and there's a road over there. That's the upward loop of the creek, right? Yeah, you have to go. That's a great point. You've got to go down the hill to get to the road. So when he said to the girls, guys, down the hill, wasn't there a vehicle waiting at the bottom of that hill? Was he really expecting them to walk willingly or even unwillingly all the way to where the crime scene ultimately was? That's quite a long way. That's quite a risk. So can you see how disorientated the cameraman is? They're flying over there and he doesn't know where to look. He's looking everywhere. He's got no idea where to look. And wasn't that exactly the point? You don't know where to begin looking. What is the epicenter of this crime? Is it the crime scene or not? So can you see how thin the woods actually are? In a weird way, although there's woods there, you can kind of see right through them. And look, there's the road on the south side. And have you noticed, although there's a road there, we've actually been struggling to see it. It's taken us much longer to see the road on the south side than the road on the north side, right? There are also more occupied dwellings on the north side near to where the bodies were found than directly on the opposite side. Why would you commit a crime where there are more people? So let me see if I can bring up that map so I can show you what I mean. So there's the road, there's the cemetery, but guess what? There's also a road on this side, right? There's also a road on this side. So it's possible, and by the way, this bridge here, it doesn't just end there. The bridge ends about on this road, right? So he could have driven to that point and then gotten from that point to that point, which is still some distance, possibly from there across there like that. But it certainly shortens the distance if you've got a vehicle, and then you can get back very quickly as well. You go from this point back the same way you've come, get into the vehicle and go back that way, right? Okay, shall we continue looking at some more of this footage? Yeah, so not quite sure what your name is. Imo Shidoro. They did cross the creek heading north. The question is, did he cross back over the creek south because he lives in the south side? That's the question. I wonder if I've got a map of that. I think I might. hope I've got it here. Let's see if I can bring it up. I thought I had a map. Looks like I don't. I thought I sent it to myself. Okay, just give me a second, just because I know I've got that map somewhere here. Let me see if I can bring it up. Let me just do that. Okay, it's not under those files. Delphi 2. It's not there. Third time lucky. Okay, give me a moment. I feel like I've got to show you this map. It's one that Lisa sent me, but give me a moment and then I'll show it to you. Just a second. So Stargirl asks, are they near the hill in this picture? Yeah, I mean, they are almost on the far side of the bridge, so they are on top of the hill. As you can see on the other side, it goes down from that point, but it's very steep on the opposite side, right? This opposite side is very steep down there, whereas the side that Abby is walking on is a lot less. It's a lot more gradual. Okay, so I think I found it now. It's this particular image. I'm not really sure. I don't know whether this is from Gray's Investigates, but it was sent to me by Lisa Wilson, basically showing they crossed this, they crossed the bridge, and then I don't think the scene's over here. I think it's a little bit further along this point, and then somewhere over here. But the idea is that they went along this road to a certain point, then crossed the creek. The crime scene is somewhere here, and then they went back across that crime scene. The perpetrator went back across the crime scene. Does that make sense? So shall I bring it up a bit bigger? So if you look at this map, you see the bridge, and the bridge ends very close to where the road is, right? I don't think it's accurate that the crime scene is here. I think it's a bit further this way, right? But anyway, so they went along this road on this side of the river, then crossed over the crime scene somewhere here, somewhere this way. But then the perpetrator went back the same way he'd come and then drove off, right? Does that make sense? That's the way I understand it. That's the way I see it and I understand it. Now let's have another look at that map. This map. Right, if you look at this map, there's the road going that way. And I'm not quite sure where the crime scene is exactly. I don't know if it's there or there, basically by Ron Logan's property, which I imagine is here, right? So they crossed the bridge, and the bridge is sort of in this area. And then they moved that way. Well, didn't he move some of that way by road? And didn't he, when he came back across, go back on the road? That's really my theory thus far. Kara Tanstone says he was on foot. Okay. So these are a couple of other images I've got. I've got this image, which I think you've seen. Can you see how far the bridge extends through that woodland? Can you see how far it goes? It's not just the section of bridge. It's more than twice that section, maybe even 3 times that section, going all the way, penetrating the woods, right? Let's bring it up. Another clear difference between the north side and the south side is that there are no paths or roads peeling off from the bridge, right? Whereas on the south side, there is a road. That's the south side. There you can see a road. Look at that. There you can see the road. North side, no roads, no paths, except for that road. South side, covered in woods, road. What do you guys think of that? So in the image above, the north side is the far right and the south side the left. The closest access to the bridge is a road leading to the cemetery, but this road is largely exposed. The road, whereas the south side, it is quite concealed. So this is another view of the bridge on the north side. Can you see how exposed that road is? A lot more exposed. This zoomed out image, I'm going to show you another image in a moment, provides a better sense of the road going through the south side of the woods, close to the bridge and along the river, versus the north side. Can you see that road there? There's no road coming from there. And this image provides an even clearer idea how there's a road right below the south side of the bridge. There's the south side of the bridge, there's the road. This is the road on the south side, zoomed in very close to where the bridge ends. There you can see the road, there's the bridge. Here's another view of it. There's the north side of the bridge. There it is, going all the way in there, and there's the road going underneath it, right, going like that. So my guess is the vehicle was on the south side. Abby and Libby were bundled into the vehicle, perhaps killed inside the vehicle. He may have forced them to ingest something or injected them with something. And then he either drove to the staging area near Logan's property and left behind a bloodbath to misdirect. I suspect that both girls inside a vehicle could also be how they got animal hairs on their bodies or clothes. Right, so this scenario of a vehicle being involved can actually explain this anomaly. In this case, is how did the animal hairs get onto them? Suppose you could say it could be just pure transfer from his clothing onto their clothing. But you would imagine, I know in my case, I've got a vehicle and my dog is in the vehicle all the time, and dog's hairs get into the vehicle, collect in the vehicle, and that's definitely a way that that could take place. Sharon says, I'm following finally. Awesome. Okay. So we also know that Al Lee confiscated Richard Allen's vehicle in mid-October when they searched his property. So was there any significance in that? Did they confiscate his vehicle willy-nilly or for a reason? And so I want to leave you guys with one final insight in terms of misdirection, staging, possibly covering up, right? I want to leave you with one more thought. Don't you find it interesting that Kathy Allen's Facebook has no photos during 2017? Did you guys know that, or has that come up in other analysis? Did she really not suspect her husband? This is the final image of 2016. Obviously around Christmas time. And I think that's an image of Kathy Allen, right? So her photos stop at, I think, December, Christmas 2016. And then this is the very next image. It's from April 2018, 10th April 2018. Live, laugh, love. Those words, live, laugh, love, they seem to be an admission of putting something difficult behind them and celebrating life instead, doesn't it? So another thing that I think you've got to acknowledge is, and I could be wrong about this, but as far as I can see, that photo of Brittany on the bridge, that's been deleted or it's been removed. I've gone back onto the Facebook and I don't think it's still there. Which one is it? Is it? It's one of these. Hold on. Sorry, let me just bring it up. I think you guys know what I'm talking about, but it's basically, I think this image has been removed. Unless I've missed something. So to be fair, I think one's got to say it's possible that all the images from 2017 may have been removed anyway, or were they removed like earlier? Were they removed before now? You'll only know if you've been following that profile for a really long time. And I think many of us haven't. So that's another aspect to accidental misdirection, accidental misinterpretation, right? Okay, so I'm not going to take it further than that. Let's have a look at what some of you guys are commenting. Charles says, it's interesting, after searching his home, he was arrested 13 days later. That might suggest that forensic testing results came in and linked him conclusively. It does seem that way. Could they have tested his vehicle? Could they have tested the dirt? Could they have tested something in the shed? Could they have found burnt remains of clothing? Could they have found her jewelry? Did they do a metal detector sweep and they found something? Deborah says, sorry, I got here late. Deborah, I'm afraid I'm about to wrap up here, but thanks for joining us. Yeah, no post from Kathy in 2017. Yeah, that's also quite interesting. Not quite sure what you mean by that. Richard Allen's wife deleted. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Heather Pounds, before she deactivated her Facebook after he got caught, she had plenty of stuff from 2017. Okay. Someone says, I believed she turned him in. That's definitely a possibility. Did she turn him in or did someone else? It's definitely a possibility. You know, if you say he was living in plain sight, how could no one know? Well, maybe someone did know, right? Maybe that person was waiting for their child to get out of, get out of the house or something. I don't know. Maybe they were struggling, having an internal struggle. Personally, I don't know if I believe that. I feel like the timing of Keegan Kline is much stronger, but who knows? Okay, yeah, I would imagine that Plunder would cover the Facebook side because that's kind of her speciality. So yeah, it does make sense. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to take it further than that. We're at 2 hours 11. I'm just trying to see what I'm likely to be covering next. So make sure you vote if you haven't voted already. Do you consider Ron Logan a suspect? 37% say yes. 63% say no. I'm one of those. I don't really think Ron Logan is a suspect. What does Stephanie say? Richard Allen's daughter is seen in a photograph wearing the tie-dye T-shirt sold to honor the girls. That's interesting. Definitely interesting. Okay. So I'm going to be returning to the Delphi case tomorrow, the next day, looking at so we've kind of said what we don't think's likely, that that it's not Ron Logan. And I think we need to kind of focus on now in the next episode on what likely did happen. So we've kind of touched on it lightly in this episode. We're going to touch on it a little bit in more detail in a follow-up. Let's just see some of what you guys are saying. There were pings from Ron Logan's phone, according to Jennifer Coffindaffer. That's not really anything new. I must say I was quite surprised to see News Nation kind of saying, this is news. This is, and it's like, it's from, I mean, that affidavit's been out since, I think, March this year, but it's actually a probable cause that they never really took any further. I mean, they took the thing further with Richard Allen, right? Something that is really interesting is, was Ron Logan ever a suspect? I think the answer is yes, but if he was, why didn't law enforcement ever kind of make it explicit? Also, did they ever change their minds? Did they ever say he's not a suspect anymore? Bear in mind he's died, right? So we are going to cover that. We're going to look at that in a bit more detail. I think that's required. We do need to look at that information, but it's certainly by no means new. I do think the Richard Allen case supersedes the Ron Logan case. They charged and arrested someone in terms of Richard Allen. They never did that with Ron Logan, even though they were suspecting him right in the beginning, right? Do you plan on covering Aiden Fucci? No. The bridge is really scary. It definitely is. What did he die from? I think he was like 80 years old when he died, somewhere around there. Not quite sure what he died from. By the way, I'm really happy to see those words. So if I can blow my own trumpet briefly, Deborah is reading this book, Bloodline, although you won't be able to buy it in this format on Amazon. You can buy the Kindle version, which has got links to music and to photos and all sorts of things. But that's really my passion project. It's a fiction book that I wrote. And that reminds me, we're going to be doing TCRS book club tomorrow, around about this time, and we're going to be dealing with a really incredible author. His name's Justin Fox. You're welcome to Google him, but he's written a book based on maritime history. So we're going to be dealing with he's also a Rhodes Scholar, a really accomplished author, and someone who also took the proper route to publishing. Got a book published. He's got over 2,000 reviews, as far as I know. He was also editor of Getaway, a magazine I used to pitch stories to when I was a photojournalist, and I actually pitched to Justin when he was editor. Editors weren't my favorite people in the world. But anyway, we're going to be talking to Justin about writing, and it's military history, and we're going to ask him what's the true crime aspect of his book, the stealth and the strategy involved in ships trying to take one another out, like in a World War II scenario. So if you're interested in reading, you love reading books, you love my books, make sure you catch TCRS Book Club tomorrow, around about this, actually earlier than this time, 2 hours earlier than this, the same time that this came out. Okay, so that's it from my side. Elizabeth says, how can I buy Slaughter? Well, it's on Kindle. So do you need the link for that? Elizabeth, where are you? Are you in Canada? What country are you in, Elizabeth? Charmaine says, I just feel Ron, that he was involved in some way, Ron Logan. How can I buy Slaughters? I can't find it. Okay. I assume you are in America, because that's Amazon.com. But anyway, this is the link. So let me just put the link in. There you go. I hope that helps, Elizabeth. Karina says, I'm already looking forward to it. Good to hear. Mel Stiller says, I believe he died in January of this year. I think that's right. I know it was January. Charles says, Richard did not act alone. Interesting point. Not sure if I agree. I think in terms of the crime scene itself, in terms of the terrain, I think he did act alone. In terms of the social media, I don't think it was alone. But anyway, unfortunately, it's quite unclear. We don't have that much clarity on that. So, you know. Love Tina says, I sometimes wonder if it was some kind of that. Okay. 70 says, I may miss out. I'm working. Okay. Charmaine says, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if there was that will be exposed. So that is something I'm going to address, is this idea that it's part of the Pizzagate conspiracy, that basically Keegan Kline is this sort of top-level operative in this elite ring. Does he look like a top-level operative? Does he look like a slick one of the top operators in Indiana. Bear in mind, it's one of the biggest investigations in that area in Indiana. Does he look like a top level operator, or does he look like a bit of a down on his luck sad sack, a bit of a loser? Which one do you think it is? Magical Mother says, thanks for your time. See you tomorrow. What time tomorrow, Nick? It's 10 p.m. till 12. Actually, no, it's 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. my time. So I'm not quite sure what that is your time. But I'll let you guys know ahead of time. But fairly early. Sad sub. Yeah. Okay. I think TK is involved somehow. Who's TK? Not quite sure who that is. Kay, thanks for joining us. Okay, so I'm gonna. Oh, Elizabeth is in England. Okay, so that's why you can't find it. So it's quite simple. If you can't find a book, you need to go into the. You need to go into the country of where you live, Amazon, right? So if I give you Amazon and it's not your country, you just change it to .co.uk. So, that is it for you. I hope that helps you, Elizabeth. I've just posted it there for you. I hope that helps. Snowflake Forest Felting from Hawaii. Aloha. Good to see you here as well. Tony Klein. Okay, I see. Yeah, that's interesting. An interesting, it does make you wonder, did Richard Allen's path intersect with Keegan's via his father in some way? It does make you wonder. Okay. Wolfie says our time went back an hour for daylight savings times. It's 5:30 p.m. here now. So I reckon it would start at your time around about 1 p.m. I think. Yeah. But I mean, it's already. I think it's already the thing's already up on. If you go onto my channel, you'll be able to see it. Shall I provide a link for you guys? I don't know if this is going to allow me to do this. Can you open StreamYard twice? Looks like you can. That's probably the easiest to do. Is I'll just provide you with the link so you can have a look at it here. So it starts in 9 hours. So this is the link to TCRS Book Club. I don't know why I didn't do that earlier. This is the link to TCRS Book Club for tomorrow. So you can already reserve your spot. 8 o'clock my time. Not sure what the time is your time. But it's 19 hours from now. So really don't miss that. Okay. I hope that Justin can recommend another really good author so that we can each time have a great author recommend another author, then, who's part of their network, who then comes on, and we can just keep the ball rolling. So we'll see how. Love Tina says we want to keep him here. Okay. What book are you covering? The book's name is the Cape. I think it's called the Cape Raider. I'll put a link in chat now. The Cape Raider, Justin Fox, Amazon. I think it's got like 2,000 reviews. 2,475 reviews. So it's quite a popular book. It's rated 4.5 out of 5, which is pretty high as well. So, guys, we're going to be talking to a proper author and getting a little bit inside his mind and getting inside the writing process and inside his journey, right? So this is a real big hit. We're going to just find out about his journey, not only writing this book, but also as an author. He's already sent me a lot of images, and I can tell you that they're really interesting. It's going to add in the same way with Ron Irwin, we looked at like a slideshow. We're going to be looking at photos that are related to, well, we'll get to that. Tracy says, thanks, see you tomorrow. Charles says, great show. Stephanie says, that's amazing. I think it will be. So I'm not going to take it further than that, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Mods, thanks so much, Terry, Stephanie, everybody else, all the members, all the new subs, welcome. Remember, if you're enjoying the content here and the people here, the community continues at patreon.com/TCRS. And if you want to order a cap, you can do that as well with a TCRS on it as well. I'm hoping to wear that pretty soon. I've ordered it, just waiting for it to arrive. And then also, thanks a lot for the super chats. It's always appreciated. And what else can I say? If you're watching this on replay, you're welcome to hit the thanks button. If you haven't watched the John Benet Ramsey episode where we deal with misdirection, make sure you go and do that. Put that on your to-do watch, right? Misdirection, that's such a great primer for this. I will be continuing our analysis in this, so stay tuned and check it out. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.